Welcome everyone to this segment of Marriage Redeemed, Marriage Sustained. And with my husband here, Joshua, and I am Leah Chikumbindi. This is our journey that we're sharing with you. This is a testimony of our marriage, and we're sharing it with the world mainly because it's what God has called us to. In the previous segment, we did talk about the difficulties we had at first and everything else that got us to this point. And my husband was sharing about the challenges when we separated the first time before we even had our wedding. We were traditionally married at the time, but I talked about that is lobola was paid to my family. And then 2016, let me say on my part, I had it. I was done, and this time I was completely done. So we had an argument this particular day in the morning, and he left to go to work, and I packed and I called the shelter, and I left and I stayed at the shelter. Now, here is what I want to say about my part leaving. He did share with you what God dealt with him in the early 2000s when I left. But let me share with you what I was experiencing in the time that I left. I went and stayed in a shelter. And this is a shelter for abused women. And this is the place where women from either from the streets, whatever situation, they house these women. But in that shelter, you can only stay there for 3 months. So I remember when I left, I completely shut off myself from what I had left behind. I remember when I was in the shelter, in those months, God was just dealing with me, kind of dissecting my life, my situation. But I had left it because we had hit rock bottom. But when I was in this place, God was working with me, and I was sitting there, I was learning, I was being taught, I was listening. God was kind of showing me things also that I had issues with in my life that I didn't know were even really causing me to have some challenges as well. And I was dealing with bitterness, I was dealing with unforgiveness, bitterness of some other issues that had happened in my life that I had not dealt with, and I didn't even know there were issues. So I'm saying this to say, when we are in a relationship, whatever relationship we have, whatever, it can be a relationship with your friends or in a marriage like this, if you come into a relationship, what we ended up realizing that you come into a relationship with baggage that you are carrying, and then it becomes part of the problems in your relationship. So it kind of adds on to that. So God was giving me this moment to work on some things, sit there. Most of the time when I was sitting and talking to the counselors, because I maximized every time I was scheduled for a counseling session, I was there. And I was remembering, I would just sit there, the counselor will ask you one question, and this question will lead to one answer to the other. And then you kept on digging and digging and digging deeper. So this was really, really a difficult moment that I was really digging and opening and dealing with these things. But it was that moment of confinement that I was dealing with to be able to look at myself in that situation. So let me just fast forward. It took about a year of this separation. And then God reconciled us. And when He reconciled us, there are situations that happened. I don't want to go into detail, but that's not the main point, is that God reconciled our marriage. And when we got back together, we knew that this was it. This was it. And I remember we talking and saying, this is a testimony. This is going to be a testimony for many marriages. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember. Remember, I think we spoke about that at a restaurant.
Yeah, we were at a restaurant. Yes. And we're saying God is going to use our marriage to restore marriages,
Yes.
to teach about marriage.
Just whilst you're on that point, there are this is coming from the book of Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22 says, he who loves purity of heart, and has grace on his lips, the king will be his friend. The eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, but he overthrows the words of the faithless. I think one of the things is sometimes we don't look at the fact that marriage requires faith too. A lot of faith. But that faith must always, the salad dressing of that faith must be humbleness and grace and peace. Quick restorations sometimes can lead to a reoccurrence of problems. On this last time when Leah left and went to the homeless shelter, do you know some of the amazing things is I do homeless ministries. I'm in the ministries of people who are homeless. And to find my wife going to a homeless shelter was a very frightening thing for me, but very humbling thing for me. I was so humbled. Because why? Today, whilst I sit with my wife, I realized that whilst she was in that homeless shelter, when she came out and we were sharing things, her testimonies of who was coming there, how God was using her. Wow. It's almost like you look at her, I'll look at my wife and go like, you need to go back there again and help those women. And I'll be honest with you, there are women out there that are running away from their beautiful homes, from homes that have everything, to go and take shelter in a place where there are conditions to live, where sometimes when they are in those shelters, they end up taking care of other people's children, and yet their own children are on their own. And it's because they are not going into these places because of their own will, but it's because the place where they are supposed to feel well and enjoy has become toxic, either in arguments, or either in blaming each other, or either in striving. And so for me and my wife, when she left, in fact, it's always funny because I've learned to see that God, when you belong to Him, He will preserve you He will help you so that you don't take certain positions without having a concrete heart. Like, we were left with about a month for me to become a deacon at our church. Because listen, you become a deacon, you become an example of the church. You become that man who, when the church looks at, or when members of the church look at, they look at you as the example of a married family. Whilst your marriage is suffering and you have a position in the church. Because you're going to find people coming to you for counseling with their marriages. And your marriage is stumbling, your marriage is suffering. Yet outside there you are counseling people. That I think is not right. You're going to find yourself counseling parents with their children, and yet in your own home, your own children are struggling. You can't counsel your children. You can't look eye to eye with your own son. You can't look eye to eye with your daughter, but you are counseling other people's children. I think there's a time when you should stop all that and be able to say, Lord, then help me to be able to make my house right first, so that I can be able to be effective to the people that I'm helping. Because I think the gospel speaks about, it says, how you treat your wife, and it says, if you make them angry, discouraged, it says it's going to cause your prayers to stumble. In other words, my prayer line with God has a lot to do with the wellness of my relationship with my wife, my family, my brothers and sisters out there. You can't be fighting with people all over in your life and expect that by the time when you go on your knees and you want to ask God or you are praying, that your prayers are going to avail. No. Make it right with your brothers. Make it right with your wife, with your children. When you go on your knees, I'll tell you, one of the biggest blessings I have is this. Sometimes I'll be on my knees praying in a room, and my wife will walk in, and you know what happens? She'll come and join me there. And she'll say, pray loudly, I'm here. Do you know how many times when I've been on my knees, I'm praying, and my daughter walks in, and she'll come right by my side, and we pray together. That is the kind of prayer line you want. Not to have a prayer line of when you're on your knees, when your child sees you, your child looks at you like you're just a hypocrite. I don't know why you are praying and yet you can't treat me right. Or when you're on your knees praying, your wife sees you on your knees and she looks at you and says, I wish you could first settle this difference, this problem between me and you, then we could pray together. I'm sorry I took that up, but I would really wanted to share that.
No, that's good. That's good. That's why we are here. We are sharing our journey. We have these questions that we are addressing, but in the process of addressing those questions, we also have some other things to add on to it. So it's a whole life of our togetherness that we are sharing with you, and we don't want to continue talking much about us. Some of the questions you're going to have are going to lead us to talk about the other things that we may not even have talked about.